everybody.
Good morning.
We have, for second Sunday of Lent, we have a passage that is in the book of Genesis. It's kind of cool to have two passages from Genesis, though they are not like back to back, but last time we had Genesis 22. So Genesis 17, and we'll go 1 through 16. The reason we will go 1 through 16 is when you will come to worship service, you will find out that they cut off a piece from the middle. Why they did it, I have no clue, because that piece is actually very important. The thing is, if we take verses, as they did, verses 8 through 14, and that's where the covenant of circumcision, or let me put it this way, that's where circumcision as a covenant sign is installed, okay? And we read about the promises of God to Abraham, and he changes his name, and then go immediately into change of name for Sarah. Yeah, it's still Word of God, but the thing is, that passage as a whole is one of, or should be one of, our foundational passages for theology of sacraments in general, and theology of sacraments, sacrament of baptism in particular. Because we do not have only promises from God, okay? We have promises that are supported by a visual sign, okay? And there are many, many parallels between circumcision on one hand and the baptism on the other hand. Like, seriously, think about that. When is the person circumcised? Okay? According to this passage, this person is circumcised. It's boys who are circumcised. They are circumcised on 8th day being born, after being born. Okay? That's why, having a parallel in Pauline writings, we do baptize infants. Okay? So theoretically, if we do not want to bother ourselves with circumcision, it's not very easy to justify infant baptism. Okay? That's one thing. Second thing, why it is important to see the parallels between circumcision and the baptism. After being circumcised, you see somebody on the street. Do you know is this person circumcised or not? I mean, hopefully not. I mean, unless he acts like a weirdo, okay? So, same thing. After a person being baptized, if you see a person on the street, do we have a halo shining? Do we have some kind of, robes of saints around him? Do we see angels above him singing? No, we don't. So it is a sign, but it is a sign, first of all, for a person and God. It is how they relate and how a person reflects or represents God's kingdom, in his or her society. Okay? So nobody knows. Nobody will check. I mean, it's very popular to wear crosses. It's very popular in some cultures to wear big crosses, whatever. You can have it. You cannot. It's not about that. And some people who wear crosses are not actually baptized. Sometimes, if you take cross as a jewelry, that's a different story. So it is it is a visual sign, it is an external sign, it is an external sacrament. I mean, the particular order of things happened, but it is so intimate that basically nobody, except very limited group of people and God, knows about that. So it is important. So with this in mind, let us go into the Bible. But before we'll go into the text itself, we need to figure out some of the chronological issues. Not issues in the sense something bad happened, but very often when we start to read Genesis 12, okay? So in Genesis 12, and then 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So it's what, like 6 chapters? How fast can you read them? I don't know, probably half an hour. I mean, 40 minutes. let's say an hour if you do deep reading. The thing is, in Genesis 12, Abram, who is by that time is with this name, Abram, is 75 years old. Okay? In Genesis 17, same guy is 99-year-old. Okay? So we read them, an hour. But actually, 24 years pass by with some events, and we know that pretty well from the scripture. If we go into 12:4, so Abram went as Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. And if we'll go into 17, when Abraham was 99 years old, okay? So we need to pay attention to those, how can I say, historical markers or chronological markers, okay? Then, 17, 18, 19, and even 20 till the birth of Isaac is in the very beginning of chapter 21. So from 17 to the first part of 21, it's 1 year. So when Isaac is born, Abraham is 100 years old. Okay? So we have like a few compact chapters, or chapters that encompass only 1 year, and we have few chapters that cover for 24 years. Okay? So just notice that. Therefore, it is important, or not therefore, this chronology helps us to understand what actually God and Abraham are talking about. What's the real promise? What's the real deal? Because what God tells him in 17 is not necessarily a verbatim repetition of what was told in 12, but we need to see when he is promised that he will be given even not simply many descendants, but he will be given kingdoms as his descendants. So far, he doesn't have one single kid from Sarah. Okay, he has Ishmael, but not really much was fulfilled. Now, he will be promised, as we will read, his name will be changed. He will be promised a king, a descendant who will be, in response, the beginning of many kingdoms, actually. And that's why we have a circumcision in the middle. And then we have a promise to Sarah. Her name is changed too. Okay, now, with this in mind, let us read. So when Abraham was 99-year-old, okay, sorry, again. If you go one verse up, 16, so when Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram called his son from Ishmael, Abram was 86 years old. Okay? So 16 here, he is 86. Okay, so we have 11 years here, and right between the chapters, we have a gap of what? 13 years. Okay, so when Ishmael will be circumcised, because he was a part of the house of Abraham, he was a 13-year-old boy. Okay? There is a mean joke about that, but I'm not going to say it. Of whatever. No, I'm not going to say it. Maybe sometime in the private, setting. But, so, we are here. So when Abram was 99-year-old, Lord, the living one, appeared to Abram and said, I am God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless, and that I make my covenant between me and you, and may multiply you greatly. Okay, the thing is, then they will go into discussion of names. The thing is, Abram by itself means the father of many people. Not peoples as nations, but like father of a multitude. Okay, now he travels across the territory, and some people meet him and say, Oh, hi, how is your name? My name is Abimelech. Okay, what's your name? And my name is Abraham. Oh, Abram. No, father of many people? How many kids do you have? I actually have one from a servant of my wife, but not really mine, okay? Half mine, okay? Kind of that way. Interesting, okay. What God do you believe? Oh, I believe in Yahweh. Okay, you probably have a nice sense of humor. Okay, so that's the thing that goes through that stuff. And then now God even sets the challenge even further. Because what he says, okay, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be the father of multitude of nations. Okay, so then he changes his name into Abraham, which means actually the father of many nations. Okay, so now we'll flip few pages, but in chapter 20, Abraham has a very interesting conversation with Abimelech. And after some things happen, by the end of 21, they have actually a treaty, a covenant with Abimelech. Okay, and again, you know, when you start to represent yourself, when you start to introduce yourself, Abimelech means my father is a king. Okay, and that most likely he was either a descendant of a king and like a crown prince, or he was a king because it was just an inherited name. Sometimes Abimelech should not be taken as a personal name. It's more was like a status. Okay, my father was a king, or my father is a king, therefore I am a king. Okay, so with that change name. So, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of multitude of nations. Verse 6. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings shall come from you. And this is very interesting. You know, at the time of Abraham, he sees that his son gets married. He has 2 boys. So with so Abraham has Isaac, and he sees 2 boys, Esau and Jacob. So he knew about them. Okay, he knew about these guys. But so far, this is almost it, as far as we usually think about that. But in reality, we need to remember that there is Ishmael, who is promised to be a very prominent guy, maybe not the main guy, but very important character in the whole development story. And in chapter 25, as far as I remember, okay, when his wife Sarah dies, he, being 135-year-old, he also was able to come up with how many? 6 kids, I think, or 7 kids. So let's go there. Chapter 25, just for fun. So 25:1. Abraham took another wife whose name was Keturah, who bore him Zimran, Yokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Okay?
And he was how old now?
Okay, when Sarah dies, he is 135. So probably, I don't think he had one very fun night with Keturah and she bore 6 immediately. So it probably took a while. So the span probably 135 to 145. I don't know how 6 kids, you know. But my point is, he has 6 kids more. Now, we don't know all of what happened. We do not know the history of all of them, but look here. One more time. Let's go through the names. Maybe something will, resemble. She bore him Zimran or Tzimran, Yokshan, Midian, Ishbak, and Shua. Anything familiar? Where Moses' father-in-law comes from. He was a Midianite. He was from that. Okay, so he was not a close relative, but he was, within some distant cousin relationship. Okay, so, and he was a ruler of his territory. So we do have a promise fulfilled that his descendants will give kings, multiple kings. Okay, if we want to go a little bit further, the Ishmael's story, if I am not mistaken, give me a second. No, that's a different story. Okay, never mind. So from him, we also have some important figures too. But the thing is, so we do have some people who can be portrayed as kings on the map of Middle East. Okay, so God keeps his promises so far. Okay, now verse 7. And I will establish my covenant between me and you, your offspring, after you, throughout their generations, for everlasting covenant. Now, that's got a little bit tricky. Okay, 17:7 we are. Okay, in 17:6 he talks about kings and many different nations. But now in 17:7 he talks about particular covenant between me and you and your generation and your offspring. And actually the word is seed, and that's where Paul takes up the whole theology of the seed of Abraham in Galatians and in other passages. Between you and your seed, covenantal seed, through all the generations. Okay? And why it is important? Because while these guys are part of the promise, the real promise is from Abraham through Isaac. Theoretically, it should have been through the older son. Turns out it's not going to go through older son. In the same sense as it did not go through the older son here. Because Ishmael is 13-year older. Okay? Actually, 14-year older by birth. Okay? But we have Isaac and then Jacob and so on and so forth. So, with this, so I will establish that I will be their God and your God to you and your offspring after you. And I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land of your sojournings, the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. I will be their God. And then God said to Abraham, as for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout the generation. This is the covenant which you shall keep between me and you and the offspring after you. Every male among you shall be circumcised. Okay? And then he goes into details of circumcision. We do not need to do it. This is not a biology class. But this is a theology class. Think about that. Why it is important. When we read the Bible, we need to, we need to put on our imaginative gear as much as we have. All the equipment for imagination you have, put it on. Think about that. What is circumcision? Circumcision, now I will say something and you probably will not believe me at first, but seriously, think seriously now. Circumcision is when you cut person in half, in two parts. Okay? So theoretically, blood is split, person is two parts. If you do it on the real, like a military way, the person is dead. Okay? In this particular case, person is bleeding but that alive. So, what does it remind you? It's your death and resurrection. Okay? Little bit different. We were talking about some parallels between circumcision and the baptism. In the baptism, it is portrayed differently, but the idea is the same. You, one way or another, even if you are all the way under, or if the water pours over you, you are underwater. What happens with a person if he is underwater? Wow. Even with the tanks. He can stay for a while with tanks, but then, let's say, they're empty. What happens? He dies. Okay, very simple. And he goes from the water, he's alive. So it's a death and resurrection. Again, When Paul builds up in Romans 6, he builds up on that. We were baptized into death, therefore as Christ was risen, we will be raised again. Okay? So that's the whole thing. That's why we need to tie it with Genesis 17. If we drop that, and unfortunately, this is not going to, basically what I'm saying right now is not going to be on the worship service. Don't ask me. So, but it is important to understand that all of those signs, as we call them sacraments, those visuals that God presents for us, are not just some kind of weird mystical experience that we need to go through. It was built into the history of salvation from the very beginning. Okay? If we are children of Abraham by faith, we need to see what happened with Abraham. And what happened with Abraham is circumcision. Now, with this in mind, I've repeated so many times, now let us go into Colossians chapter 2. Okay, in Colossians chapter 2, okay, starting with from 8 to 14 roughly, but in the middle, that's what we're looking for. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy or empty deceit. Okay, just for a side, it's very fun now. I mean, if you talk to people and you say that you are a pastor or a theologian, it's no biggie. But PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, that's a big deal. That's a really cool stuff. Okay, in Paul's days, apparently it was not. I mean, it was a bunch of philosophers all around the place. And not many people who were able to teach the Bible. In Luther's days, you could start in the university system. Could start to teach philosophy as soon as you get master's degree. But you could not teach theology or the Bible unless you have a doctorate degree. Okay? For a number of circumstances and history, we have everything, reversed. But, so, you would not be taken captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human traditions, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ, Messiah. Okay? For in him the whole fullness of deity dwells bodily. And you have been filled in him, who is the head and the rule and authority. In him also you were, okay, now, verse 11. You were circumcised. How? With the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of flesh, by circumcision of Christ. Now, verse 12 explains it. Having been buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith in the powerful working of God, who raises him from the dead. Okay? So any one of us can answer the question, are we circumcised or not? And the answer is yes. Boys, girls, everybody. By a special circumcision that was not done by hands, that was done through the baptism. So even if nobody had, very sharp knife next to you, still, spiritually speaking, you are connected to the very same covenant in the Genesis 17. Baptism was not a Christian invention. It was transformation of one particular sacrament that they used to have, and now we have it with a different form. We have a same philosophy, or have same theology, or same idea behind that thing. Yes, Eric.
I was just going to say that there's you're referencing the physical act of circumcision, but then there is also circumcision of the spirit, that's.
See, the thing is, in Colossians, it was one of the few unique places where you had, in most of the Mediterranean synagogues that Paul would go to, people were mostly Jewish with some presence of Gentiles. Here, many people, about probably half and half, were Gentiles. And they didn't know. I mean, okay, if we want to be normal members of the society who believes in Jesus the Messiah, should we be circumcised by hands? Okay? And what he tries to explain here is no, because if you go through baptism, that's your circumcision. And there are other places, actually in another letter, he says, I mean, if you really want to be that cool, if you want to do circumcision, I mean, just castrate yourself and, I mean, be so cool if you really want to do it this way. I mean, he knew how to use language, you know, sometimes it was sharp enough. Okay, so going back into Genesis 17. So in Colossians, this is an important parallel that we need to always keep in mind when we talk about baptism and circumcision, and how do we read Bible as a whole? Okay, because if we have this huge divide between what we call Old Testament and the New Testament, we lose a lot. Okay, we lose really a lot. Now, again, Genesis 17. Now, the person should be circumcised at the 8th days. Okay, let me save that. Just in case. Okay, when you read the Bible, you kind of need to know at least some basic mathematical rules. Okay, 8th day. 8 in the Bible is not 6 plus 2, 4 plus 4. 8 in the Bible, 99.9% of the times, is 7 plus 1. Why? Because we have 7 days of creation, and then we have a new beginning. Okay? So you go through, in a sense, the old world, and immediately in the Old Testament, we have a sign of new world coming. Okay, that's why actually the term Old Testament is not the best one. Okay, it's not biblical. But we have it for now. We're not going to go there. That's what we have. But the point is, even in the circumcision, we have a new beginning idea. Okay, and that's important. That's why some of our feasts are starting on the 15th day. Or they go for 7 and 1 day. Okay? So 15 is the same thing as 7 plus 1. Okay? Plus, it is 15th day if we would talk about this. If you have a 15th day in the month, if you know, and if you didn't know, you will know now, that biblical, I'm not even going to say Jewish calendar, biblical calendar is a combination of solar and lunar calendar. So months are lunar, but still we kind of go with some things where sun is still important. So if we go with a new moon, which is dark, to the very end, okay, so on the 15th day, what kind of moon we're going to have? We're going to have a full moon. So if we want to celebrate in the evening, that gives us the most light. Okay, makes perfect sense. That's why they left Egypt in the middle of the night, right after Passover, under full moon. I mean, they didn't have to stumble in the dark. I mean, think about that, the military campaign. You need to lead out 600,000 men with their wives, kids, and so on and so forth. Ideally, you want to have some light. That's your light. See, because the God is not a joke. He knows what he's doing. You know, he brings up all of those, what we think of natural elements, into one particular place or combination of elements in such a way that everything can be done. And people around are like, how did it happen? Well, because he's in control. I mean, he knows what he's doing. At least we believe he knows what he's doing, and whatever they believe is their thing. So this is important. So when we count that, 8th day is a new beginning. Okay, going back. Okay? But, going back, I mean, we are not going to read it, but in the same 17th chapter, one more time. Abraham was, when he was circumcised, was 99-year-old. It's kind of fun, I guess. I don't know. Don't want to try it when I'm 99. Okay? His first son, Ishmael, was 13. Probably not fun. But it is important for us to remember that we as a community of believers, went through this kind of experience being circumcised when we are old. We need to remember it when we will come into book of Joshua. Okay? We just crossed the Jordan. We are about to enter into the promised land, but for 40 years we have not kept the covenant of circumcision. So basically, everybody who grew up, with few exceptions, before they storm Jericho, they have to be circumcised. And that's their act of faith, because Jericho is right there, and those guys kind of see us. So if you are circumcised as an adult, you might want to spend some days or maybe up to a week or two, in some quiet place. So the question is, who are you going to trust? You're going to trust science, who will say, no, you cannot do it in front of your enemies. Or you're going to trust God, who is not want to keep you as a sitting ducks, but wants to be sure that you will enter as properly anointed. Okay? You went through the baptism in Jordan. Now you need to have this sign upon you. Okay? So these kind of things are correlated with each other. Now, we have a few minutes left. Now let's go to verses 15 and 16. And God said to Abraham, see, Abraham is he is changed person. As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. Okay, in English, it does make really big sense, but the closest thing is Sarai means my princess. Okay? Sarah means the princess. Okay? So the word Prince of Peace in Isaiah 9:6 is a Sar Shalom. Okay? So Prince of Peace, Sar, and the female version of that would be Sarai if it's my princess, or Sarah. Okay? So she is the one. Therefore, that's the whole thing. That's what when her name is changed, she is not simply the princess within the realm of Abram. And I will say a couple of words on a few previous chapters. But before that, now she is the princess. And now read verse 16. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. I will bless her, and she shall become nations. Okay? She herself will give birth to nations, basically. And kings of people shall become from her. Okay? So she is the one. This is one important thing that we read. That Abraham knew about that when her name was changed. That she will give a son. Now, if we flip the page in 18, remember this story where 3 visitors come to Abraham, and they kind of repeat it, that we will be back in about a year, and you will have a son. And what did Sarah do? What was Sarah's reaction?
Laughed.
She laughed. What does it tell you? I think she was caught by surprise. What does that tell you? That Abraham didn't really share the information. Why? I don't have an answer. Don't look at me. Seriously. I don't know why. But when we look at those heroes in the Bible, it is important to see some things which are great and we can follow their steps. Like with David when he fights with Goliath. Yes, this is awesome. This is really cool. But on the other hand, there are things that we do not really like, or sometimes at least we don't get it. Because this is an amazing thing. She was suffering in some sense under pressure of Hagar, and he could have tell her that actually, I had the visitation from God. You will trust me. We will have a kid. That's why the whole procedure with a few weeks ago with all the blood everywhere. That's the only reason for that procedure, is to commemorate that you and me, will have a kid. I don't know why. There is another thing connected to Genesis 17. With that understanding of the meaning, my princess and the princess. Okay, now think about that. Way a little bit back in chapter 12, when they are on Egyptian territory. Okay? Abraham, Sarai, at that time, my princess, with their servants, and it was many servants. Okay? They come to Egypt. And she almost immediately was taken into Pharaoh's palace. Why? Maybe because she was actually from some kind of, if not really royal, but from some kind of noble family. She was not some kind of peasant girl, that pasturing some flocks, but she was from the family, and the guy who represented himself as her brother is the father of a nation. Okay, so they were important guys. When they entered into Egypt, people noticed them. Okay? Yes?
Scripture says, I just read it 2 days ago, that Sarah was a very beautiful woman.
Yes.
And that her attractiveness is why they went to the brother-sister routine. Because if they found out that he was married, they would have killed him. And kept her.
He was afraid he'd be
Yeah.
so he passed
Definitely.
her off as his
Right.
sister.
See, and partially he was correct. It was his sister, and the customs of the land was if you see the brother, you need to negotiate with the brother. So he was trying to buy out some time. I understand all of that. But my point is, if it would be two of them, and they would be from the lower class, she would not be taken into the palace of the Pharaoh. Even however beautiful she was. In those days, people really took care of their clans or class status. She could have been taken as, fun girl, however fun that would be, probably fun for Pharaoh, not fun for her. But she would not be considered to be a part of his I know, in our mind it doesn't really sound right, but his lawful harem. Okay, to be a part of that structure, she should have been from a up higher class. And that understanding with names might clarify it. But yes, she was beautiful. By the way, how old she was? If he was 75 and she's 10 years younger, do your math. 65. She was so beautiful that Pharaoh was like really attracted to her and said, "Oh, I want her. Really want her." Okay, just saying. It's fun to read those stories. And we don't know how old he was.
Another interesting take is her telling Abraham to go sleep with her maid, who was Egyptian. And here's where men don't understand women. Sometimes when a woman gives you permission, she doesn't really want you to do it. She said, "You can go ahead and do that." She didn't really mean it. She was just being nice. And what she wanted Abraham to say was, "That's all right, honey, I'll wait." But oh no, Abraham being the man goes and... That's where sometimes when women say yes, they mean no.
That's rather complex to understand.
And good luck on understanding that.
So,
Because no woman.
I'm not going to even argue with that. No. See, the thing is, the reason I'm not going to argue is because we have a previous story where a woman, or the woman at that point in the history, gave a fruit, and he took it, while he shouldn't. That's kind of the same thing. Though to kind of somewhat justify Abram at that particular story is, in the Bible, it's very, very interesting. It says that, okay, there is a verb to know, okay? Adam knew Eve and she bore a son, okay? In the story of Abraham and Hagar, it's very interesting. It's a different verb. It says, he went into her. So, no emotional attachment, nothing. So, in a sense, he was following the letter of the law, whatever Sarah was saying, but later on it developed into a much more complicated story. Yes?
You stated that maybe Abraham didn't tell Sarah, but at the same time, if Sarah's been hearing this for how many years, and then she's, of that age, imagine if you came home and told your wife at that age, oh, by the way, God says we're going to have a son. And you've been hearing this all along, and it's like, whatever.
I know. Yes. What I just saying that, what I wanted to point out is, Bible is a book about real life stories.
Right.
And they are very often complicated. We do not have those Avengers in the gold and shine armor, who never do any, not even mistakes, but something like, wow, why would you do that? Okay? We do have normal, real human beings. We do have a relationship between husband and wife, which is complicated, and both of them made them complicated. Let's put it nicely. So it's neither one, neither two. It's all parties that were involved into whole of that thing later on, and especially within the rivalry of Isaac on one hand and Ishmael on the other hand. It's many parties, and it is complicated. But when we look through that, when we read through that, we always need to see that however complicated the story, somehow God, who is in charge of everything, he kind of leads everything through. And at that particular point, it was unsolvable. But he helps people to figure out, with forgiveness, with reconciliation, with understanding of their own silliness, they are able to go through the process. Yes?
Is that why God stayed with Abraham, even though Abraham went and had Ishmael?
What was the first part? That's why God what?
He stayed with Abraham and continued the covenant with Abraham.
I think so.
Though after
I would think so. We have this wonderful phrase in 15:6, which Paul repeats later on. And he, means Abraham, believed the Lord, and he, Lord, counted to him, Abraham, as righteousness. See, this is faith-based relationship. What Adam fails at is an understanding when Satan comes and says, that guy who just gave you wife, he does not have a good ideas about your life. He wants something bad for you. He wants you to lack of a great understanding. He doesn't want you to be like God. He doesn't want you to understand the difference between good and evil. Okay? And Adam believed it, that God has bad intentions. Unlike that, going through all what Abraham goes through, sometimes it's not easy.
Understood, but Abraham still went against the covenant that God had made with him, right?
Yes and no. I mean, he was promised a son, an ideal situation if there was a custom, okay? We do not really have it, but there is a biblical custom. So Hagar should have delivered to the knees, what is called, of Sarah. So theoretically, Ishmael should have been treated as a son of Sarah. But they didn't play it right. And, okay.
But God blessed Ishmael anyway. He had 12 sons.
Yes.
Princes, right?
Yes.
Princes, not princesses. Sorry.
So, yeah, see, the thing is, that's why if we go back, if you notice, as I said, in verse 6, before we go into the covenant of circumcision in verse 7, before that, we first see that Abram is given new name, Abraham, father of many nations, and the promise is you will have many kings. And then God narrows it down and talks about the offspring, the seed, and then everything down is about the seed. Okay, so we have it. This is a real picture of real life.